In the quiet heart of the desert, Clara Dawson believed peace had finally come. But when danger returned to her doorstep, one loyal soldier, Ranger, her faithful dog, answered the call once more, and beside him, the wild spirit of Luna, the Bobcat, would remind her that courage never truly retires. Dawn slid over the desert like a warm hand smoothing the wrinkles from night. Clara stood on her porch with coffee cooling in her palm, listening to the hush between wind gusts. Ranger dozed by the steps, one ear cocked. From the rocks beyond the mesquite, a thin rasping cry stitched through the stillness. She set the mug down and moved toward the sound, boots whispering over grit. Ranger rose, alert but patient, shadowing her flank. The cry came again, broken, stubborn, wild. When Clara pulled a branch aside, two gold-green eyes watched her from a crack of stone, bright as coals dampened by rain. The Bobcat was small as a rumour, ribs mapping her sides, one foreleg tucked wrong beneath her. Dust clung to her whiskers. She didn't growl, she measured. Clara lowered to a knee and let silence do the talking. Ranger kept his distance, weight balanced, reading the air the way soldiers read rooms. Clara slid off her flannel and laid it on the sand. The Bobcat shifted, a tremor of pain rippling down her shoulder. Ranger didn't blink. "Easy, girl," Clara said, voice angled soft, the way she used to calm field wards. A vulture wrote a slow circle above them, as if signing consent for mercy. With a length of gauze and patience, Clara lifted the cat free. The body was heat and thorn and quiet fury. The Bobcat did not strike. She watched Clara's hands the way a scout watches maps calculating exits. Ranger paced a crescent around them, tail low, eyes steady, the perimeter already drawn. Inside the kitchen, light pooled like honey across tile. Clara rinsed blood with lukewarm water, teasing out the burr lodged deep. The Bobcat's ears flattened, but she held. Ranger lay near the threshold, chin on paws, humming an old vigilance. The house seemed to breathe with them one rhythm, 3 hearts. Clara wrapped the leg, not too tight, not loose, and set a shallow bowl near the crate she'd lined with an army blanket that once rode in convoys. The Bobcat sniffed, tested the edge with a paw, and sank into the wool as if memory lived there. Ranger exhaled. Sand drifted from his fur like time. She named the cat Luna because her eyes kept catching the light in crescents. When evening pressed its cool forehead to the windows, Luna rose and limped to the doorway, scenting the outside. Ranger lifted his head. The two traded a long, undecided look, wild boundary meeting trained border. Thunder shuffled over distant hills. Luna flinched and slipped back into shadow. Clara dimmed the lamp, sat on the floor, and read aloud the way you read to someone braver than you. Ranger inched closer to the crate, not inside trust, but skirting it, like a sentry testing the fence for gaps. Near midnight, wind knocked the chimes into a nervous little song. Luna eased forward, nose twitching, and placed her injured paw against the blanket's seam. Ranger answered with the smallest thump of tail, a truce signed in lower case. Clara felt the room tilt toward a promise she hadn't asked for. Before dawn, coyotes barked somewhere along the dry wash. Luna lifted her head first. Ranger stood and faced the sound, muscles stacked, no bark, just readiness. The desert paused to listen with them. In that stillness, Clara heard something clear. The wild was willing to share custody of this life. Sunrise came thin and bright, stretching gold across the floorboards. Luna stepped out of the crate, testing the leg, shoulders rolling like liquid stone. Ranger took one pace back to give her lane. Clara opened the door to the porch. Cool air flowed in. 3 shadows moved as one toward the light. Dawn found Luna testing the porch boards, Whiskers tasting the chill. The wrap on her leg held steady, a pale ribbon against wild fur. Ranger stood at the rail, giving her space but not abdication. Clara let the screen door sigh, then set a shallow dish. Steam curled from broth, like a small prayer. In the far pasture, a hawk rode the pale thermals. Luna studied the bowl as if it might ask questions back. She lowered her head, drank, and let the heat travel the long road of her body. Outside, the wash glimmered with last night's tinny rain. Ranger watched her gait one careful step, then another mapping where pain ended and courage began. Her ears loosened, and the room breathed with her. By mid-morning, wind slicked the grass and made the mesquite whisper. Luna ghosted along the fence line, reading the world with her nose. Moth dust, tire rubber, a rabbit's fast pen stroke across sand. At the gate, she paused. The desert stared back, vast and bright, like a story daring her name. A dust devil teased the horizon. Clara followed at a respectful drift, boots hush soft, offering presents instead of rescue. Ranger quartered the yard, a quiet metronome of patrol. When Luna's bandage snagged on a thorn, she hissed once. Pride stung more than skin. Clara crouched, freed the cloth, and waited until the breath came easy. In the afternoon heat, Luna curled in the window's gold square. A fly traced lazy orbits. Ranger snapped it from the air and spat it out, unimpressed. Clara cleaned the wound with a touch that carried field hospitals and goodbyes. Luna held her gaze, not tender, not hostile, simply allowing the truth. Toward evening, thunderheads stacked like mountains no one owned. The first thunder roll thudded in Luna's ribs the way old doors thud shut. She slid under the table, eyes bright and too wide. Ranger settled near, not touching, close enough to be a wall. Clara dimmed the lamps and counted the beats. The storm broke hard. Sheets of rain stitched the yard to the sky. When the screen banged, Luna flinched, then crawled forward, nose pressed to Ranger's shoulder as if testing weather on a known shoreline. He didn't move. The two of them, islanded together, made the room feel smaller and safer. Puddles leaped like frantic hearts, a flash threw their shadows enormous across the wall. For a breath, Luna saw another cat inside the shape hole, unhurt, undaunted. She stood, trembling, and pushed her weight onto the wrapped leg. Pain answered, but softer than before. Clara whispered, steady rhythm, and the lightning passed without stealing her nerve. At the storm's hungry center, a coyote yodeled from the arroyo. Luna answered with a low, thread-thin growl she didn't mean to give. Ranger flicked an ear. Clara cracked the door to hear the rain's percussion, and a cold gust braided them together. The house smelled of wet wool and ironed earth. It echoed off the tin roof. Silence came the way good sleep does gradually, then all at once. Rain dwindled to patient drips. The chimes forgot their fear. Luna crept from beneath the table and placed her paw on the threshold. Ranger rose and met her halfway. No ceremony, just weight shared in a small, unremarkable miracle. A faucet ticked like a metronome. Near midnight, Clara left a trail of broth, a gentle breadcrumb line toward the crate. Luna ignored it and chose the rug by the door instead, a sentry post with moonlight privileges. Ranger circled once and settled on her windward side. Together they faced the world they could not control, awake and calm. By morning, The clouds had sailed off like ships that never dock. Luna stepped into the yard, the bandage thin with yesterday. She tested the soft give of sand, then the firmer promise of stone. Ranger kept pace at arm's length. Clara leaned on the rail, smiling at nothing, which was everything. A grasshopper sprang and nobody chased it. Morning settled over the ranch in a pale, forgiving hush. Luna moved like poured shadow along the porch rail, testing the air the way a match tests darkness. The storm had scoured scent from the world, but not from memory. Ranger stretched, shook off sleep, and watched her choose the day with deliberate pause. She slipped to the yard, ears swiveling toward the wash. New smell, thin and metallic, threaded the sage rubber, gun oil, something that didn't belong to wind or cactus. Luna froze, tail low, whiskers forward. Ranger trotted a quiet arc to flank her. Clara came down the steps slow, reading their bodies like weather. At the fence line, sand kept last night's secrets badly. Boot prints dented the crust where no neighbor walked. Luna placed her forepaw inside one, measuring the width like a jeweler weighs stone. A tiny growl lived in her chest. Ranger's hackles didn't rise, but his breath shortened, as if syncing with a new metronome. Clara knelt and brushed grit from a heel mark, eyes narrowing with the old competence she never bragged about. The track cut toward the service road, then doubled back through greasewood. Whoever came had patience. Luna stood still, mapping the pattern across a desert made suddenly smaller, the way rooms shrink around truth. A distant motor coughed, then thought better of it. Luna's head snapped east, pupils widening to coins. She bounded to a rock outcrop, climbed with the confidence of stone remembering rain. From that height she saw it, a black van idling behind a curtain of heat shiver, half a mile out, undecided as a lie. Ranger joined her on the lower ledge, chest rising steady. Clara lifted binoculars, glass catching sun. No plates, windows too dark. The van didn't move, as if waiting for a signal only the arroyo could give. Luna's tail flicked once, the punctuation mark for a sentence she hadn't learned to say indoors. The county Ford rattled into the drive, dust curtaining its wake. Detective Harris stepped out, brim low, voice softer than the gravel underfoot. He didn't ask how they were. He asked what the animals saw. Clara pointed. Luna didn't look away. Harris followed her stare and knew it wasn't coyotes writing this chapter. He spoke of a name, Miguel Rojas, of debts unsettled, and men who erase witnesses with the same motion they erase tracks. Ranger listened as if English were a scent, not a language. Luna blinked slow, then stretched, bones clicking like beads, and slid down the rock, choosing ground with care meant for battlefields. They walked the perimeter together, woman, dog, bobcat. Harris marked angles for light and cover. Clara noted lines of fire she hoped never to use. Luna threaded between cholla and mesquite, practicing silence until silence believed in her. She found a cigarette butt by the gate, cold but arrogant, and tapped it aside. Near noon, heat fiddled with distance and made the van dissolve into waves. It reappeared closer, then farther, as if rehearsing an approach. Luna crouched under the shade of a cattle panel, eyes bright as flint. Her bandaged leg no longer argued. It negotiated. Ranger took the windward post and gave her the leeward. The van finally rolled, slow as a shark choosing a shoreline, then eased away down the service road, trailing a promise. The yard exhaled. Luna rose and padded to the porch, brushed her shoulder against the step, and sat facing the empty horizon like it might apologize. Nothing did. Nothing needed to. Clara set a metal bowl on the boards. Ranger drank first, then stepped aside. Luna leaned in, steam kissing her whiskers, and sipped until the day steadied. Harris tipped his hat and said he'd circle back at dusk. When he left, the desert opened a little. Luna closed her eyes and let the sun claim her bones. Late light pooled across the porch like cooled copper. Luna lay sphinx still by the step, watching dust braid itself along the service road. The bandage at her leg had thinned to a pale ribbon. Pain was a quieter animal now. Ranger dozed with one eye slivered open. Clara's mug steamed, untouched. As if waiting on a verdict, a low tremor rolled the horizon. Luna's ears tilted first, catching the sound before it learned its name. Heat rippled, then parted. The black van, slow as a bad idea that knows it will be adopted. Ranger stood, shoulders stacking, tail level. Clara set the mug down and let the screen door whisper shut. The van idled at the far fence, engine ticking like teeth. Two men stepped out, silhouettes cut from gunmetal, one tall and loose at the joints, one compact, patient, the kind who collects debts and dust. They didn't touch the gate, they touched the air with their eyes, like it might incriminate them. Luna slid under the porch lattice, whiskers combing shadow. From there, the world smelled in paragraphs hot oil, old tobacco, rain ghosting wood. She mapped them to bodies and pockets, her pupils thinned to needles. Ranger moved to the porch edge, not growling, not wagging, a quiet stone fitted to its wall. Clara stood at the rail, body soft but bones aligned. "Can I help you?" Her voice carried the topology of calm. The tall one smiled without teeth. "Wrong turn," he said. The compact man said nothing, only watched the Bobcat's shadow move like a second hand across the porch skirting. He memorized how silence behaves. The gate latch clicked, a small sound that felt like a verdict. The tall man jiggled it, laughing, and let it drop. Ranger didn't flinch. Luna's tail gave one controlled twitch, an editor's mark. Clara's hand hovered near the bell rope that ran to Harris's radio on the fence post. Wynne wrote nothing useful. A gust lifted grit into their eyes. The men turned their faces, human and briefly helpless. Luna flowed from the lattice, took 3 low steps, and froze where sun sliced the boards. Her eyes found the compact man's stare and held it. Time pressed its palm on the scene, steadying a pulse that wanted to run. The compact man's fingers brushed his jacket hem. Ranger shifted weight, a half-inch of warning. Clara felt the porch boards telegraph the decision before it happened. Luna's ears moved in fractions, cataloguing choice. A shadow crossed the van's windshield. A second man inside lifted a phone. The air seemed to lean closer. Then the tall one winked like a cheap sign. "No harm meant," he said, backing toward the road. The compact man lingered one breath longer, filing away the Bobcat, the dog, the woman, the distances between. He touched the gate again, gently this time, and left it as found. The van swallowed them and rolled. They didn't leave clean. The smell of them dragged behind the road like a net. Ranger exhaled through his nose, catalogue in order. Clara's shoulders lowered by inches. Luna walked to the fence, tested a post with her cheek, and left a clean ribbon of fur where Steele had tried to own the day. Harris arrived fast enough to make gravel talk. Clara told him the words. Luna gave him the scent, nose high, hunting the shape they had made of fear. He nodded once, eyes going older. They'll paste the edges first, he said. Coyotes do it. Men too. Ranger touched his hand. A soldier's acknowledgement. Dusk came on like mercy. The sky traded its brass for bruised plum and a single clean star. Luna curled on the top step, her flank against warm wood, facing the road that had learned their names. Ranger took the threshold, chin on paws. Clara sat between them, a lighthouse stitched from 3 quiet flames. Morning rose brittle and clean, the kind that makes even the horizon look cautious. Clara moved through the house in slow circuits, checking locks, kettle, light. Ranger trailed her without command. Luna sat on the window ledge, tail twitching like a fuse, eyes fixed on the faint tire marks the storm hadn't erased. The day unrolled itself quietly, but quiet had edges. Luna slipped outside, padding to the fence line, where scent lingered in low air. Diesel, sweat, metal. She lowered her head, drawing it in, memorizing the geometry of danger. Ranger joined her, muzzle brushing dust, his body spelling the same warning Clara already felt in her bones. By noon the wind shifted west, carrying the faint tang of smoke. Luna watched the sky pulse pale and orange. She climbed the water trough to see farther. Down the wash, heat shimmered around the black van again. Closer now, unmoving. She hissed, the sound small and exact, like a match scraping flint. Ranger stiffened. The war was back. Clara gathered what she could. A first aid kit, the revolver from the drawer, the old collar tag of her husband's unit that Ranger still wore. We stay quiet, she whispered, voice deliberate. Luna prowled the walls, checking cracks and corners as if the house were an animal in need of grooming. Thunder muttered without rain. Afternoon light turned amber and suspicious. The van's doors opened. 3 men crossed the fence, boots sinking into the sand. Luna watched from the rafters, shadow melting her outline. Ranger held his post by the doorway, muscles wired but patient. Clara steadied her breath, her mind moving like maps folded for retreat. When the first man kicked the screen door, dust bloomed like gunfire. Ranger lunged, soundless, a single, trained motion. Luna dropped from the beam above him, pure muscle. No thought. She landed on a shoulder, claws finding fabric, drawing a line of panic. The man screamed. The world narrowed to violence and memory. Gunshots cracked. Clara ducked behind the table, wood splintering at her ear. Ranger barreled into another figure, teeth closing on the weapon wrist. Luna slashed low, fast as heat lightning, then sprang for cover beneath the counter. Her breath came sharp, the smell of cordite mixed with her own fear. War had a taste. For a heartbeat, silence drowned them all. 1 man down, 1 retreating, 1 shouting in Spanish for the others outside. Ranger bled from his flank, but his eyes were steady, fixed on Clara. Luna crept beside him, pressing her shoulder to his leg. 2 rhythms, panting and purring, found each other in the dust. Clara raised the revolver and fired once through the open door. The shot echoed down the dry wash like an alarm clock for ghosts. The men fled to the van, tires shredding gravel. When the sound died, only the wind answered, carrying the smell of burned rubber and adrenaline through the eaves. The house stood, barely. Ranger sank to his chest, panting, a thread of red across his fur. Luna licked the wound once, quick and clinical, before sitting beside him like a sentry carved from dusk. Clara pressed a towel to his side, whispering, "You're all right, soldier." Her hands trembled, but never missed their mark. The sun slid down the ridge, laying thin gold over chaos. Clara wrapped Ranger's wound, gathered spent shells, and closed the door with a finality that didn't comfort anyone. Luna watched from the window, eyes wide and wet, with the reflection of fire still living somewhere out there. Peace was just an intermission. Night settled, thick as velvet smoke. Luna crawled to the foot of Clara's chair, curling in Ranger's shadow. His breathing steadied. Her purr stitched the edges of the room together. Outside, coyotes began to sing. Inside, 3 survivors learned the fragile art of waiting for morning. Dawn arrived soft as linen, and the house breathed easier. Luna lay beside the chair leg, eyes half closed, tracking Clara's hands as they rewound Ranger's bandage. The smell of saline and wool stitched the kitchen together. Outside, the desert held its breath, as if pausing the day so wounds could learn their new edges. Clara boiled water, cleared splinters, set order where violence had broken it. Luna watched the ritual like a student learning a quiet religion. Ranger lifted his head when she passed, a soldier's nod. Luna leaned in and touched her nose to his cheek, a brief seal on a pact that neither had spoken aloud. When the kettle clicked, Clara opened a dented footlocker and pulled out an olive blanket, soft with miles. Beneath it lay a tin of photos and a leather folder, edges salted by time. Luna rose, curiosity padding ahead of pain, and stepped closer. Paper smells drifted up, dust, graphite, and sun-baked memory. Clara sorted the photos, hands steady now. Convoys under white heat, a field tent at dusk, David grinning, goggles crooked, one hand on a lean Malinois that wasn't yet called Ranger. Luna stood on the chair rung and peered down. Faces watched back from another country, their silence respectful and exact. Near the bottom lay a photo different from the rest. A small, mottled cat perched on a crate, ears tufted, eyes bright as struck coins. A handwritten note curled at the corner. Bobcat kitten near cop, fed on scraps, 2014. Clara exhaled. Ranger's tail thumped once. Luna touched the paper with a careful paw. Clara turned the leather folder. Inside, the old handler's card, a map with grease pencil lines, and one dog tag stamped with David plus Ranger. Tucked behind it, a folded slip. Protect her, always. Luna leaned closer, reading the gravity in Clara's face. The room seemed to lower its voice to listen. Rain ghosts brushed the windows, though the sky was dry. Clara set the tag on the table and stroked Ranger's brow. Luna sidestepped nearer, shoulders rippling like poured sand, and squeezed into the triangle of chair, woman, and dog. She settled there, heart slowing in the shelter of something older than luck. Ranger shifted and winced. Luna rose and nudged his water bowl forward with a deliberate scrape. He drank. Clara smiled without showing teeth, the way the desert smiles with shade. The kettle sighed again. She poured broth, and steam lifted like a benediction. Luna lapped, heat pooling back into her muscles. Harris arrived mid-morning, boots whispering apology across the threshold. He studied the patched door, then the animals. Clara showed him the photo of the base bobcat. His eyebrows climbed a notch. Sometimes the desert keeps its own books, he said. Luna blinked slow, filing his scent with the ones worth keeping. They walked the perimeter, mapping entry, exit, and wind. Harris marked sightlines. Clara marked quiet places to wait. Luna threaded low through creosote, practicing stillness until birds forgot her. At the gate she rubbed her cheek along the post, setting a boundary the way wild things sign treaties with land. By noon, the light turned tin-bright. Clara fixed the latch, tightened hinges, rehearsed the small choreography of safety. Ranger dozed in thin shade. Luna stood sentry on the steps, tail carving little commas in the air. The van did not return, but its absence felt like a letter the day forgot to mail. Evening came with the scent of sage and warm iron. Clara slid the photo of the base Bobcat into a frame and set it on the mantel beside David's. Luna took the rug by the door. Ranger chose the threshold. 3 silhouettes folded into the wall as the house dimmed. The desert breathed out, and peace thin but honest held. Night had a thin pulse, faint but awake. The desert stretched under it, full of whispering sand and the promise of something circling closer. Inside the house, Clara sat by the oil lamp, mending a tear in Ranger's harness. Luna prowled along the window's edge, her reflection doubling the one cat ready, one remembering. The air smelled of dust and iron. Harris's warning replayed in Clara's head. They'll come again, and they'll come meaner. Ranger shifted beside the door, eyes open but calm. Luna leapt down and brushed against Clara's boot, her body low, movements slow and measured, as if the floor itself had become a training ground. Before dawn, the wind changed direction, rolling cold from the west. Luna lifted her head first. A scent rode the air exhaust, sweat, the bitter tang of men who move without conscience. Her fur rippled, ears angling toward the horizon. Ranger's breath shortened. Clara rose, heartbeat finding an old rhythm it hadn't used since the war. They moved together without words. Clara checked the revolver, reloaded each chamber like prayer beads. Ranger limped slightly, but his eyes gleamed with focus. Luna perched on the sill, scanning the outline of the ranch. Every bush a potential lie. The desert seemed smaller now, compressed by waiting. The first light crawled in grey and uninvited. A truck door slammed somewhere beyond the wash. Luna's pupils widened to ink. She dropped from the sill and stalked toward the kitchen door. A ripple of instinct against still air. Ranger followed, silent but for the soft scrape of claws on tile. Clara whispered, "Hold." Through the dusty glass, movement. 3 figures crossed the yard, rifles slung, cautious. The men didn't see Luna crouched low by the barrels, her body aligning with shadow. They didn't notice the faint click of a latch being tested from inside. Clara steadied her aim, but didn't breathe. Ranger waited for her hand. The men reached the porch. One knocked, almost politely. When the silence held, another kicked the door hard enough to shake plaster dust free. Luna's muscles bunched the moment between decision and leap. The second kick splintered wood. Clara whispered something that sounded like goodbye. And then the Bobcat moved. She exploded from the dark, claws and fire, colliding with the first intruder's chest. He went down hard, weapon clattering. Ranger lunged past her, taking the next man low. Clara fired once, one bright flash that turned the room white. For a second, all 3 lives folded into noise and survival. Smoke burned the air. The men retreated, dragging one wounded, firing wild into the dusk. Luna crouched under the table, trembling but unhurt, her breath fierce and fast. Ranger pressed against her flank, panting, blood streaking his side. Clara dropped beside them, the smell of gunpowder and sweat thick as earth after rain. Silence returned, heavy and trembling. The window glass rattled from the last echo. Clara checked Ranger's wound, whispering the old field words to keep fear busy. Luna's eyes tracked the door, wide and wild. tail lashing softly. She didn't understand words, but she knew victory always costs something. Harris's truck lights appeared in the distance, slow and steady, like hope that refused to run. Clara stood, hands shaking, and waved once. Behind her, Luna climbed onto the counter and stared out, shoulders rising with each slow breath. The sky was pale now, unsure if it wanted to be morning. When Harris entered, gun drawn, he found 3 survivors caught between war and quiet. Clara smiled faintly. All edges gone. Ranger's tail tapped once. Luna blinked, then turned toward the window again, eyes catching the first streak of sunlight. Outside, the desert was calm, but calm, she'd learned, was never the end. Dawn rose, bruised and coppery, the kind of sky that doesn't promise peace. Clara stepped outside to a world rinsed clean but trembling. Ranger hobbled behind her, stitched and stubborn. Luna crouched near the porch post. Fur puffed against the chill. The desert smelled of rain, but underneath, there was something else, the scent of return. Harris's tire tracks led away, fading into the road, like a memory already fading. Clara scanned the horizon. The air felt heavy, expectant. Luna's ears twitched toward the wash. Ranger followed her gaze. His low growl was less sound than pulse. Clara knew before she looked dust rising in the distance, slow and deliberate. The van had come back, joined by a truck, black and dull under the sun. Shadows poured out 5 men this time. Their footsteps fell in rhythm with her heartbeat. Luna slinked closer to the house, tail flicking, eyes gold and electric. Ranger leaned against the doorframe, every breath a countdown. Clara whispered, "Not again." But war never asks permission. The first shot came from the truck, kicking dirt near the fence. Clara ducked, heart steady but fast. Luna darted beneath the porch, crawling through shadow, weaving a line toward the open flank. Ranger moved to the window, a ghost of discipline. The soldier in him was awake again. Clara fired once, then twice, the echoes collapsing into wind. Luna burst from under the boards, a blur of tawny motion. She struck the man crouching by the barrels, claws flashing, his shout drowned by sand. Ranger lunged through the door, teeth bared, dragging another down. The air split with noise and grit and purpose. For a breath, it felt endless claws, gunfire, heat, the metallic taste of fear and rage. Luna moved like lightning, breaking its own rule. She leapt from the van hood, tail whipping, landing square on a rifle arm. The shot went wide, carving sky instead of flesh. Her snarl filled the yard, wild and beautiful. Ranger took a bullet graze, staggered but didn't fall. Clara reloaded with shaking hands, whispering her husband's name as if it steadied aim. The last 2 men backed toward the truck, faces pale beneath dust. Luna padded forward, shoulders rolling, blood on her whiskers, gaze unblinking. The desert waited for its verdict. When the firing stopped, sound didn't come back right away. Just the whisper of wind through mesquite and Ranger's rough breathing. Luna crouched beside him, pressing her flank to his ribs. Clara dropped the revolver, her arms trembling from something deeper than recoil. The men fled, one dragging the other, leaving fear behind. The van burned quietly in the field, a black wound in morning light. Smoke coiled upward, thin as regret. Luna sat in the grass, chest heaving, eyes following the rising plume. She wasn't panting, she was watching, measuring, ensuring. Ranger lay beside her, muzzle dusted grey, tail twitching once with approval. Clara knelt beside them, tears cutting clean paths through soot. "You did it," she whispered. "You both did." Luna blinked slow, lowering her head to the ground, ears flattening at the weight of quiet. Ranger's nose touched Clara's hand. They had all survived the same storm, though none of them were the same. Later, Harris returned to a scene already fading into stillness. He stood by the burned-out van, hat in hand, murmured something only the wind could keep. Clara tended Ranger's wound. Luna watched from the threshold, tail curling like smoke. She understood now that survival wasn't noise, it was the silence that follows. Evening lowered its soft gold curtain over the ranch. Clara sat on the porch, hand resting on Ranger's back. Luna climbed beside them, her fur glowing in the dying light. The desert looked endless again, pretending innocence. Together they watched the horizon dim, 3 silhouettes stitched against a peace they'd earned. Morning crept in slow, fragile as a new scar. The air smelled of ash and wet metal. Luna stood at the edge of the porch, tail low, eyes tracing the black circle where the van had burned. The desert had already begun to reclaim its sand swallowing tire marks, wind brushing away the story. Ranger slept behind her, his breath shallow but steady. Clara poured water into a basin and washed soot from her arms. Her reflection in the glass trembled between exhaustion and disbelief. Luna watched her, head tilted. The woman's movements had changed. She no longer walked like prey. Ranger shifted and let out a faint whine. Luna padded over, pressing her shoulder to his side. The house felt quieter, like it was holding its breath after a storm. Flies hummed near the doorframe, drawn by old blood. Luna moved to the window, staring out at a sky pale enough to sting. A hawk circled high above, patient and alone. Clara followed its path, her hand resting on the bobcat's back, grateful for something wild that stayed. By noon, the sheriff arrived with his hat in hand and the weight of paperwork behind his eyes. He studied the scene, said little. Luna stayed close to the shade, watching him the way only animals watch, seeing what words forget to say. When he left, the dust his truck kicked up looked too much like smoke. The heat thickened, carrying silence in long waves. Ranger woke, tried to stand, and faltered. Clara caught him before he hit the floor, her voice steady but eyes wet. Luna paced in a tight circle, restless, her fur lifting in anxious patterns. The desert outside pulsed with light, too bright, too alive. Ranger's breathing deepened, then steadied. He lay down again, head heavy on Clara's lap. Luna sat nearby, her gaze softening as she watched the rhythm of their shared stillness. For the first time since the attack, she didn't flinch at the creak of wood or echo of boots. The house was wounded, but it was breathing. That evening, Clara stepped outside alone. Luna followed, slipping like smoke through the doorway. The sun melted into a horizon of bronze and rust. Clara spoke quietly, words not meant for reply. Something about David, about promises, about never leaving things half finished. Luna brushed her leg once, silent as wind agreeing. From the wash came the distant cry of coyotes. Luna froze, listening. Ranger lifted his head from the porch, ears tilting. Clara smiled. "They're singing," she whispered. Luna's pupils widened. She knew the difference between warning and song. Tonight, it was neither. It was remembrance, the sound of survival, echoing home. Later, the first stars pierced the dusk like cautious eyes. Clara sat on the step with a blanket over her knees. Luna leapt up beside her, fur glowing silver under moonlight. The two watched Ranger's shadow move slightly as he dreamed legs twitching, chasing something invisible yet kind. The desert cooled and smelled faintly of iron and sage. Luna turned toward Clara, pupils reflecting the flame from a single porch candle. There was calm in her stillness, but not peace. Wild things don't keep peace. They keep balance. Clara reached out and brushed her ear. "You kept us alive," she whispered. A soft wind rolled through the valley, carrying the scent of rain that wouldn't come. Luna lifted her head, eyes on the dark horizon. Somewhere out there, the world had already forgotten the violence, but not her. She blinked once, slowly, claiming the quiet like territory earned through blood and breath. When the candle guttered, Luna slipped down to the dirt and curled beside Ranger. The night felt cleaner now, washed of danger, but not memory. Clara leaned back against the post, eyelids heavy. 3 survivors in one frame, their outlines fading into the hush. Above them, the desert kept its silent watch. The sun lifted slow, as if testing whether the world was safe again. Dew clung to the fence wires, tiny mirrors of a sky already forgetting yesterday's smoke. Luna stretched in the yard, muscles long and lean now, the limp gone. Ranger lay on the porch, head on paws, tail giving one lazy thump. The desert looked honest for once. Clara moved through the kitchen, humming something half-remembered. Steam from the kettle braided into the sunlight. On the counter, a small frame stood David in uniform, a younger Ranger beside him. Next to it, a newer photograph. Luna curled at Clara's feet, eyes closed, peace unposed. The house had learned to breathe again. Outside, the wind carried the scent of mesquite and something faintly sweet, like new rain on old stone. Luna followed it to the gate, brushing against the post she'd once marked with fear. Ranger joined her, gait stiff but proud. Together they scanned the horizon, guardians out of habit, not need. The silence felt earned. Harris arrived near noon, dust haloing his truck. He stepped out with a careful smile and a metal box under one arm. "For them," he said simply. Inside, 2 small badges gleamed, one for valor, one for loyalty. Clara's hands shook as she took them. Ranger sniffed, unimpressed. Luna studied her reflection in the silver. They held a quiet ceremony beneath the old windmill. No speeches, no flags, just wind and light. Clara pinned the badge to Ranger's collar and laid the second beside Luna's bowl. "Heroes don't always wear leashes," Harris murmured. Luna blinked slow, unbothered by titles. She had no need for medals, only belonging. When Harris left, the afternoon folded into heat shimmer and humming bees. Luna found her usual spot under the cottonwood, tail flicking against dappled light. Ranger lay nearby, his eyes drifting shut. Clara watched them both from the porch, pen in hand, trying to write, but ending up tracing their silhouettes in her notebook instead. In the fading light, Luna rose and padded toward the burned patch where the van once stood. Grass had begun to push through the char. She crouched low, sniffed the ground, then looked up at the sky as if measuring distance between past and peace. The wind touched her fur and moved on, satisfied. Ranger joined her quietly, standing shoulder to shoulder. No words, no sound, just the soft rhythm of 2 heartbeats sinking to the desert's pulse. Clara watched from a distance, her throat tight but warm. She understood now some bonds don't begin in gentleness. They're forged in survival and sealed by trust. Night descended in thin ribbons of indigo. Clara lit the porch lamp, its glow spilling across the yard. Luna approached, eyes catching the light. Gold turned molten. She leapt onto the steps and sat beside Ranger, gaze sweeping the horizon once more before finally relaxing. Her posture said the world could rest now. Inside, Clara brewed tea and set out 3 mugs, out of habit, one for her, one empty for David, one near the window for whoever kept watch. Luna's tail swayed, brushing the floor like a metronome, marking gratitude. Ranger sighed, and the sound filled the house like music remembered from another life. Later, as the moon climbed, Clara opened the door. Cool air wandered in. Luna stepped outside, gliding into the yard, her coat painted in silver. She paused, turned back once toward the porch where light and love pulled together, then melted into the shadow's edge. Some wild things stay, others keep watch from just beyond. By dawn, Ranger stirred, eyes following the horizon. Clara came out with her coffee, whispering, "She'll come back." And somewhere beyond the wash, a faint shape moved through the sage, sleek, calm, alive. The desert blinked awake around her. Luna trotted toward the rising sun, carrying peace like a secret she'd decided to keep. If this story touched your heart, just drop a 1 in the comments, or a 0 if it stayed quiet inside you. Don't forget to subscribe. There are more gentle stories waiting just beyond the trees. In the lonely stretch of New Mexico desert, where wind moves like memory through the cactus bones, Clara Dawson thought her quiet life was safe. Just her, Ranger, the old Belgian Malinois war dog, and Luna, the wounded bobcat she'd nursed back to trust. But peace was only the calm before something darker. When a black van stopped at her fence, the past came home carrying smoke, blood, and a soldier's promise. Inside that small house, 3 hearts, 1 woman, 1 warrior, 1 wild soul would fight for the only thing worth keeping: family.